This is a Force for Good broadcast. My name is Alistair McConnachie. Coming up in the programme today, we're going to be talking about our open letter to Theresa May, intended to stiffen her resolve and help her to stand up to the separatists. But before we get to that, we have some choice words for the leadership of the Labour and Tory parties here in Scotland. And we've always got choice words for them because we've got to keep them on their toes, because they are essentially the front line against Scottish separatism. Well, in that regard, we were disturbed to read the following article, which was sent to us from politicshome.com, 13th of October. Labour says Theresa May must not block second Scottish independence referendum, and it quotes a Labour spokesman saying, quote, "Labour is opposed to a second referendum, but if the Scottish Parliament votes in favour of one, Westminster should not stand in the way." There is so much wrong with that short sentence. Where to start? Firstly, as we never tire of saying, Holyrood does not have the right to pass an act for a referendum. It would be illegal under the terms of the Scotland 1998 Act. And as for standing in the way, well, Ruth Davidson was also asked previously, and she is quoted as saying about whether or not the British government should stop one. Absolutely not. Constitutionally, the UK government shouldn't block it, no. Well, constitutionally, Ruth Davidson, you are absolutely wrong. It is the British government which represents and has a responsibility for the integrity, the unity, the security, the stability of all of the United Kingdom. And if there is a threat to that unity, then the British government is the constitutional centre which can stop that threat. Holyrood is not the constitutional centre of the United Kingdom. And a colleague of ours also pointed this out on Facebook when our colleague said in a post, "When did the Scottish Executive become the constitutional bedrock, the centre of the UK? Unionism needs to get tougher on nationalism, not weaker. But suppose we better not upset the SNP though, as it means upsetting Scotland, apparently. Pathetic." And then our colleague goes on, "Attempts to stop Scottish nationalism. Devolution failed. More devolution failed. Yet more devolution failed. A referendum failed. Appeasement failed. Being tough on Scottish nationalism, not even been tried." That's well said, our colleague. But you know what really gets us down about those sorts of quotes from Labour and Tory is the stench of appeasement that appears to run through those words and through that rhetoric. It's almost like you're in a battle and the generals are saying, "Oh, don't fight back. Just let the opposition do what they want, because if we fight back, it might just make them angrier. If we fight back, maybe people on our side will desert. If we fight back, maybe people on our side will cross over to the opposition side." There's no sense here that you have to hold a line and then you have to push back and gain ground. There's just this sense that we have got to roll over to anything that the SNP and the Scottish separatists promote. Well, we urge our MSPs and all the pro-British MPs in the British Parliament to stand up, make the case for the United Kingdom, widen the frame from just being about Scotland to being about the United Kingdom. And we'll speak more about that when we address the open letter which we've sent to the Prime Minister. But before that, from time to time, this programme is going to alert you to various articles or books which we think have got value from the pro-UK, pro-British, pro-Unionist point of view. And we read an excellent article this week from the blogger Effie Deans, and her website is effiedeans.blogspot.co.uk. Effie Deans being EFFIEDEANS, Effie Deans, and she wrote this article 14th of October. It's Scottish nationalism that suffers from xenophobia, and she makes some very good points and a couple of paragraphs here which I think are excellent and show great insight into this particular matter. Scottish nationalists like to try to hide the roots of their philosophy. They have all been carefully taught to describe themselves as civic nationalists. But this is a mere fig leaf. It's very easy indeed to test the limits of civic nationalism. How would it be if a few 100,000 people from other parts of the UK decided to move to Scotland? By the standards of civic nationalism, they would all immediately be Scots. But what if these people continued to feel British too? What if they opposed Scottish independence because they felt the same identity as people in other parts of the UK? What if these few 100,000 people put Scottish independence beyond the reach of the SNP forever? Would you really all be so welcoming? She continues, no one became a Scottish nationalist because of the idea of civic nationalism. Scottish nationalists vote for the SNP because they feel patriotism only about Scotland and not about the UK. If you felt patriotism about Britain, you thereby would not feel outvoted any more than someone from Vermont feels outvoted if he votes for one presidential candidate but his candidate loses. You only feel outvoted if you think that these others who outvote you do not share your identity. If you thought that people in other parts of the UK were your fellow countrymen, you would not complain about the EU referendum. It's only because you think they are not your fellow countrymen that you complain. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. People who understand themselves as British don't care, one way or the other, how the constituent parts of the United Kingdom voted at the EU referendum. We just see the overall vote as one United Kingdom, and everybody voting as our fellow British citizens. We don't separate it up into the Scottish vote versus the English vote versus the Welsh vote versus the Northern Irish vote. As Effie Dean says, again, you only feel outvoted if you think that these others who outvote you do not share your identity. If you thought that people in other parts of the UK were your fellow countrymen, you would not complain about the EU referendum. That really gets to the heart of it. Check out that article at effiedeans.blogspot.co.uk. Okay, now to our open letter which we sent to the Prime Minister on the 17th of October. Should be landing on her desk on the 18th of October. And we're going to read most of it here to you. We mentioned to the Prime Minister that we're a pro-UK organisation based in Glasgow. We've been going since the 21st of March 2012, and that we're going to be talking about this letter in this YouTube broadcast. We start by saying thank you for standing up to the Scottish separatists and for stating clearly that we voted to leave the EU as one united kingdom, and that we will leave it as one united kingdom. And we say, please know that there are many people, likely to be the majority, in Scotland who do not want another separation referendum. When you, Mrs May, stand up against the separatists, you give us all hope that we will not be put through the nightmare of another rerun. And we say, you will be aware that legally a bill on a referendum should not be presented or passed by Holyrood, and certainly could never receive royal assent. And we detail in this letter the passages of the Scotland Act 1998 which reserve the Union as a constitutional matter to the British Parliament. It's not a constitutional matter to be dealt with legally by the Scottish Parliament. It's reserved to the British Parliament. And we point out that an act of the Scottish Parliament is not law so far as any provision of the act is outside the legislative competence of the Parliament. And that relates to reserved matters such as the Union. We also point out that the presiding officer has a duty not to allow such a bill to be presented if it is outside the legislative competence of Holyrood. And that as per section 32 para 3a, an illegal bill cannot receive royal assent. So we detail and break it down for Mrs May on the first page, and then in the second page we state the law is clear. A bill which Holyrood has no legal authority to pass cannot become law. We ask you, Mrs May, to please ensure that this point is emphasised and respected, and we urge you to please stand strongly for the position of the British Parliament as the final arbiter on whether or not there can be such a referendum. And we state, this is because an event which could break up Britain is not for Scotland alone to initiate. It is a matter for everyone in Britain, wherever they live. Therefore, the ultimate decision on such a referendum must rest with the collective constitutional authority which represents everyone in Britain. That's our Parliament at Westminster. Now, we say here, separatists don't believe that the ultimate authority lies with the British Parliament because they don't accept that Britain is a nation with a collective constitutional centre. However, if we accept that Britain is a nation, then we understand that the British Parliament has the ultimate authority, the perfect right, and the absolute duty to maintain Britain as one. And then we say to Mrs May, in this regard, we are aware that there are some people in the Conservative Party who are advising you badly. There are some people who believe Britain is not a nation, but merely some kind of loose association of nations, merely a union state or a union of nations. However, we say here, that frame is not strong enough to hold the UK together in the face of separatist assault. A A far stronger frame is that we are one unitary nation state, a nation of unions which has been built up through the centuries. One United Kingdom, as Mrs. May herself has called it. Now we point out to her, as she is aware, that last time there was no bill or act of the Scottish Parliament. That illegal process was avoided through David Cameron essentially just passing the powers to Holyrood, and we've stated before that that was possibly, arguably, unconstitutional. However, that's how he got round it last time. So we say to Mrs. May, we prevail upon you. Please continue to stand against a second separation referendum. Please emphasise the relevance and importance of the British Parliament on this matter. And please do not initiate a referendum process from Westminster. And we finish by stating we cannot allow our unitary British nation state to be threatened once again with fracture in order to appease a minority of noisy separatists. Please know that there are many people in Scotland who are not represented by the SNP and who look to you and to the British Parliament to stand for our interests and to keep our United Kingdom together. The world needs Britain as a global force for good. We cannot fulfill that destiny if we have allowed ourselves to be torn apart. Now, we said in that open letter, we said we cannot allow our unitary British nation state to be threatened once again with fracture in order to appease a minority of noisy separatists. And we were thinking about that, and we decided to crunch some numbers regarding a worst case scenario and to show the tiny minority which could be responsible for effectively breaking up the United Kingdom. For example, just imagine that there were another referendum and that the same number of people voted as last time. Now we've put the numbers up on the screen there. Imagine that there was 51 to 49% to break up the United Kingdom. The figures would fall as demonstrated there, giving a separatist majority of 72,399 people. Now, if you take that as a percentage of the entire British electorate at the moment, that would mean that 0.16% of the entire British electorate would be responsible for destroying Britain. That's not even a fifth of 1% of the entire British electorate. You know, that crazy situation just cannot be allowed to happen. So if you live in England, Northern Ireland or Wales, please take away from this video the message that you are involved. And we want you and we need you to be involved, because this is about Britain, and Britain belongs to us all. You can get involved by helping support the groups which are standing for and fighting for the United Kingdom. For example, you can help fund us. This is our day job. In our last video, we put out an appeal for a new dedicated video editing computer. We're still a little bit short of funds for that. So if you can help us, now is your opportunity. And you can do so by clicking on the PayPal link, which is in the Show More box below. or you can click on the donate link, which links back to our website, which gives you other options. You might also want to donate by standing order. Anybody who donates over £120 a year, either by standing order or by donations, is entitled to ask for our free annual report, which details exactly how the money is spent. Please also subscribe to our channel by clicking on the red subscribe button, bottom left, and please like the video by clicking on the thumbs up, bottom right there. Check us out also on Facebook and Twitter. This has been a Force for Good production, and my name is Alistair McConnachie.